So, tell me, was I wrong for what I did? Or would you have done the exact same thing if you were in my shoes? Because honestly, for months, maybe even over a year, I had to listen to my stepchildren, constantly, almost gleefully, tell me to my face, to their father's face, that I was replaceable, that they could just find someone else to be their mom figure, someone better, someone who actually deserved to be there. And you know what? Eventually I just said, okay, go ahead, replace me. And I did exactly what they said they wanted. I let them. And the fallout? Well, let me tell you, it was glorious. But also, deeply, profoundly sad in a way I hadn't expected. This whole mess started, or at least the seeds were planted, about 3 years ago, when I married David. David was, and still is, the love of my life. He's kind, thoughtful, incredibly handsome, and he makes me laugh like no one else. He also came with a package deal. 2 children, Emily, who was 15 at the time, and Tom, 13. I knew going into it that being a stepmom would be challenging. I'd read all the articles, watched all the YouTube videos, braced myself for the typical teenage angst and the natural loyalty kids have to their biological parents. What I wasn't prepared for was the outright hostility and the casual cruelty that would become a daily part of my life. Their mother, Sarah, had passed away from a sudden illness about 2 years before I met David. It was a tragedy, and I never, not once, tried to diminish her memory. In fact, I went out of my way to respect it. We had pictures of her up in the house. We talked about her fondly, and I even helped David maintain her memorial garden in the backyard. I truly believed that by showing respect for their mother, I could earn some respect for myself, and maybe, just maybe, a place in their hearts. Oh, how naive I was. From day one, it was clear I was an intruder. Emily was the ringleader, and Tom, being younger, and perhaps more easily swayed, followed her lead. Their eyes held a perpetual glint of suspicion, sometimes outright disdain. Dinners were a battleground. If I cooked, it was not like Mom's. If I offered help with homework, it was met with, Mom always explained it better. If I suggested a family outing, it was, Mom would have taken us somewhere fun. Every single interaction was a comparison, and I always came up short. David tried his best. He'd sit them down, he'd talk to them. He'd explain that I was a part of his life now, that he loved me, and that they needed to be respectful. It would work for a day, maybe 2, and then the subtle digs, the pointed remarks, the eye rolls would start again. It was exhausting. I tried everything. I baked their favorite cookies. I offered to drive them to their friends' houses. I went to their school plays and sports games, cheering louder than anyone. I even bought Emily a really expensive camera she'd been wanting for her birthday, hoping that a grand gesture might break through the wall she'd built around herself. She took the camera, said a perfunctory, "Thanks," and then spent the rest of the day ignoring me, showing off her new gadget to her friends. Tom was a little easier to crack initially. He liked video games, and I'm pretty good at a few of them, so we'd play sometimes. For a brief period, I thought, okay, maybe I'm getting somewhere with him. But then Emily would swoop in, whisper something to him, and he'd suddenly become cold and distant again. It was like she had him on a leash, pulling him back whenever he showed even a glimmer of warmth towards me. The replaceable comments started subtly. Emily would say things like, "Dad, if you wanted someone to cook, you could just hire a chef. You know, it'd be way better than this." Or, "Tom and I don't need a mom. We have a mom. And if we did need someone, we'd pick someone who actually gets us." Then they grew bolder. One evening, David and I were having a rare moment of peace on the couch, watching a movie. Emily walked in, saw us, and without missing a beat, scoffed. "Honestly, Dad, it's not that hard to find another woman. There are plenty of women out there who would be way more fun and actually treat us like family instead of, you know." She gestured vaguely in my direction, as if I was some unpleasant stain on the furniture. I remember my stomach clenching. David, bless his heart, immediately snapped. Emily, that is completely out of line. Apologize to my name right now. She just rolled her eyes and stomped off. Tom, who was lurking in the hallway, snickered. David was furious, but what could he do? Punishments were met with more resentment, more hostility. Grounding them just meant they were physically present, but mentally miles away, radiating contempt. They knew their power. They knew David wouldn't kick them out. They knew their mother's death gave them a shield against any real consequences. And they used it, constantly. The worst instance, the one that really cemented this whole replaceable idea in my mind, happened during a family therapy session. David had insisted we go. He was at his wit's end, and I was emotionally drained. We were sitting in the therapist's office, and after about 20 minutes of Emily and Tom giving one-word answers and side-eye, the therapist asked Emily how she felt about me being in their lives. Emily leaned forward, looked me dead in the eye, and with a chillingly calm voice, said, "I don't really care. She's just here. If she left tomorrow, it wouldn't make a difference. Dad could find someone else, someone better, someone we actually liked. She's replaceable." Tom nodded vigorously beside her. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at David, whose face had gone pale with shock and anger. The therapist, a seasoned professional, looked genuinely taken aback. I tried to hold back the tears, but a single one escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. David immediately reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. "Emily, that is an awful thing to say," he exclaimed, but she just shrugged. "It's true. It's what we think. She doesn't belong here. She's not Mom, and she never will be." That night, I cried myself to sleep. David held me, apologizing profusely for his children's behavior. He said he didn't know what else to do, that he felt like he was failing both me and them. I told him I understood, but a seed had been planted in my mind. A dangerous, tempting seed. The idea that maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe I was replaceable, and maybe, if I was, I should just let them replace me. It wasn't an easy decision. I loved David, and the thought of leaving him over his children's cruelty broke my heart. But the constant emotional abuse was taking its toll. My self-esteem was shot. I felt anxious all the time, and the joy had drained out of my life. David kept promising things would get better, that they'd eventually come around. But how long was I supposed to wait? How much more of myself was I supposed to sacrifice for kids who openly despised me? I started pulling back, slowly at first. I stopped cooking dinner as often, saying I wasn't feeling well, or that I had work to catch up on. I stopped offering to drive them places, citing my own errands. I stopped attending their school functions, claiming conflicting appointments. David noticed, of course. He'd ask if everything was okay, if I was upset. I'd just say I was tired, or busy, or that I felt like I was getting in their way. He didn't fully grasp the extent of my emotional withdrawal. Or perhaps he didn't want to. He was so desperate for peace, for us to be a family, that he clung to any shred of normalcy. The kids at first didn't seem to notice my absence. In fact, Emily actually seemed happier when I wasn't around, openly discussing plans for the house, or what they wanted for dinner with David as if I were invisible. It confirmed my darkest fears. They really didn't care. I was truly replaceable. But then, as my disengagement became more pronounced, small things started to shift. The house wasn't as tidy. Meals became more haphazard, often consisting of takeout, or whatever David could quickly whip up. Laundry piled up. David, who worked long hours, was suddenly overwhelmed, trying to keep up with everything I used to do. On top of his demanding job, he started looking tired, stressed. Emily and Tom, who were perfectly capable of helping, still largely refused to lift a finger, claiming it wasn't their responsibility. Their arguments with David became more frequent, not about me anymore, but about chores, about their allowances, about their general lack of help. It was during one particularly heated argument between David and Emily, where she was yelling about how she didn't have time to clean her own room because she had important things to do, that the plan really solidified in my mind. David was standing there, looking utterly defeated, and Emily was just railing at him, completely oblivious to his distress. It was then I realized they weren't just pushing me away, they were inadvertently pushing David to his breaking point too. They wanted to replace me. Fine, I would give them exactly what they asked for. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed and continued to fight for a place in that family, hoping for a breakthrough that might never come? Or would you have taken their words at face value and walked away, letting them experience the consequences of their actions? Be honest, what would you have done? Okay, so I made my decision. I planned it carefully, meticulously. I wasn't going to just disappear without a trace. That would be too cruel to David. But I was going to make my exit in a way that left no doubt about why I was leaving and whose words were the catalyst. I chose a Sunday evening, a typical family dinner. David had cooked, trying to make things pleasant. The kids were, as usual, absorbed in their phones, barely acknowledging his efforts or my presence. To dinner, as we were clearing the table, mostly David and I, as the kids begrudgingly took their plates to the sink. I turned to David and said, "David, can we talk for a minute, privately?" Emily immediately perked up. "Oh, is she finally leaving?" she sneered. Tom snickered again. My heart ached for David, but I looked at Emily, then at Tom, and felt a cold resolve settle over me. "No, Emily," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We're going to talk right here, right now, as a family, because it concerns all of us." David looked confused, a little worried. He knew something big was coming. I took a deep breath. For over a year now, I began, looking directly at Emily and Tom. You two have consistently told me, directly and indirectly, that I am replaceable, that you don't need me, that you could find someone better, someone who actually belongs here. You've said it to my face. You've said it in therapy, and you've made it abundantly clear through your actions that you want me gone. Emily's mouth dropped open. Tom's eyes widened. They hadn't expected me to confront them like this, to actually use their own words against them. David looked between us, utterly stunned. "What are you talking about, my name?" he asked, his voice strained. "I'm talking about the truth, David," I replied, still focused on his children. "I've tried everything to be a good stepmother to you two. I've tried to be kind, supportive, loving, respectful of your mother's memory. I've tried to be a part of this family, but you have rejected every single one of my efforts. You have actively pushed me away, ridiculed me, and made it clear that I am unwanted." I paused, letting my words sink in. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. "So," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I've decided to take you at your word. You want me to be replaced? Fine. I am removing myself from this family. You are free to find someone better, someone who belongs here, someone you actually like. I am giving you exactly what you asked for." Emily finally found her voice. "What? You're leaving Dad because of us?" she stammered, a flicker of genuine shock, and perhaps even fear in her eyes. "I'm leaving this situation because I deserve to be in a family where I am valued and respected, not constantly told I'm an inconvenience and easily replaceable." I corrected her. "And if that means leaving your father, then yes, that is the consequence of your actions." David finally snapped out of his shock. "What are you saying, my name? Are you leaving me?" His voice was filled with heartbreak and confusion. I turned to him, my eyes softening. "David, I love you, you know that. But I cannot continue to live like this. I cannot be constantly emotionally abused by your children. I have told you, I have told the therapist, how much this has hurt me. You've tried to fix it, I know you have, but it hasn't worked. Your children have made their choice, and I am making mine. I will be moving out next weekend. I had already secured a temporary apartment, packed some essentials, and arranged for a moving company. I had been planning this for weeks. Emily and Tom were speechless. They had wanted me gone, but they had never actually thought I would leave. Not really. They probably thought I was bluffing, or that David would just convince me to stay. But my resolve was clear. The next week was a blur of packing, legal discussions with David about separation, and a lot of tears from him. He pleaded with me to stay, promised he would do more, that he would make them change. But I just shook my head. It's too late, David. They planted the seed, and they nurtured it. This is their harvest. On the day I moved out, David was heartbroken. The kids, however, were conspicuously absent. They had conveniently made plans to be at friends' houses. They didn't even bother to say goodbye. I drove away, a strange mix of relief and profound sadness washing over me. Relief that the constant emotional warfare was over, and sadness for the broken dream of a family I had so desperately wanted. The aftermath was exactly what I expected, and yet not entirely. Initially, I heard through David, who still called me, often distraught, that Emily and Tom were actually somewhat pleased. They had won. They had driven me out, but their triumph was short-lived. David, overwhelmed by the sudden absence of the person who had managed their household, cooked, cleaned, and often mediated their arguments, quickly became exhausted. He had to pick up all the slack. He tried to get Emily and Tom to help more, to take on some of the responsibilities I had shouldered, but they balked. That's what she was for, Emily apparently told him. You need to find another her. And David, utterly fed up, finally snapped. He told them, in no uncertain terms, that they had created this mess, and now they had to live with the consequences. He cut off their allowances, limited their screen time, and made their participation in household chores mandatory. They had to cook some meals, clean their own bathrooms, and help with laundry. When they tried to argue, citing that I used to do it, David's response was chillingly direct. Well, you drove her away, didn't you? You told her she was replaceable. So go ahead, replace her. Until then, you're going to do it yourselves. Because I am not your maid, and neither was she. The house quickly devolved into chaos. David, despite his efforts, couldn't keep up with everything. Emily and Tom, used to a certain standard of living and service, suddenly found themselves in a much less comfortable environment. Their complaints grew louder, but David was firm. He even started threatening to send them to live with their grandparents if they didn't cooperate. It was a bluff, I think, but it scared them. About 2 months after I left, I got a call from David. He sounded utterly exhausted, but also surprisingly, a little different. They miss you, he said quietly. My heart gave a little lurch. Who misses me, David? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Emily and Tom, he replied. They keep saying how much they hate cooking, and how much they miss your dinners, and how they wish the house wasn't a mess. Emily actually said, maybe my name wasn't so bad after all. I almost laughed, but a wave of melancholic satisfaction washed over me instead. They had gotten what they wanted. They had replaced me by making themselves take on my roles. And it turns out, I wasn't so easily replaced after all. I didn't go back. David and I are still separated, working through things. He's taking a much firmer hand with his children, and they are slowly learning the value of contribution and respect. They've even sent me a few tentative, awkward apologies via text message. Mostly Emily, surprisingly. I haven't replied yet. Maybe one day, maybe. But for now, I'm living my life, finding my peace. and they are living with the consequences of their actions. So, that's my story. It was a hard lesson for everyone involved, but especially for Emily and Tom. I truly hope they learn from it. Like this video if you are on my side and think I did the right thing. Subscribe for more stories like this. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.